How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the KSS YouTube channel. On today's episode, which you're not going to see our faces in, we're going to get into an in-depth guide on K-swapping your Civic. We've been doing this channel for 3 years, and we've never made an actual video on how to K-swap stuff. So we're going to do our in-depth guide with all the charts, instructions, parts, and all the details that we came up with to help you through your K-swap process on your Civic. So let's go through the slides and get to it. Alright, for your K-Series engine swap, well, you're going to start with an engine. We put two options here. There's K20 and K24. There is a K23, but it's in only one car, and we're going to leave it out because it's so rare and not many people use it. Nobody builds with them, so K20 and K24. So your first option we got on top here is the K20. They're lighter, higher red line, and what you'll find on an Acura RSX Type S, which is a K20, is the Type S oil pump, which is the most desirable and allows you to have more oil pressure at higher RPMs. On the bottom here, we have our K24, which is the 2.4 liter version of the K-Series. These are great engines as well, found in some Hondas and Acuras. They have a better torque output, but they are a little taller, so sometimes you'll be running into some hood and ground clearance issues. A little heavier because they are taller / bigger displacement engines, but also a great option as well. Alright, so moving into details with our K20 engines, here's a little list that we put together of stuff that you could find, I'd say commonly, but we didn't put every single K20 because if we did, we'd be here probably for 2 weeks because there's so many different casting numbers. As you can see, there's many options for horsepower and torque. We recommend you do your own research on what you want to do for power and your power goals. As you can see in the last slide, we got economy VTEC as opposed to 3-lobe VTEC. This is what people would call not real VTEC, so it won't have that hard smacking ba-wop sound. You got your intake manifolds and a bunch of other little details, pros and cons, and yeah, so that's your K20 list. We recommend you do your research for your power goals. Okay, now here's our slide of K24 engines that we picked out. These are what we would say is the most popular as well. We got our different torque. As you can see, it's like quite higher than a K20 because what changes with a K24 in that displacement is maybe just a bit of bore, but a lot of stroke, and that's what gives your torque change. As you can see, you got your 3-lobe VTEC, real VTEC, and economy VTEC, fake VTEC options. We also suggest doing your research for your power goals and budget on which engine you should use. And we'll just give you a bonus on that 02 to 06 K24A1. You could put a Type S oil pump on that one without having to cut the oil pump. So that's just a little bonus that we'll give you. But yeah, let's move on. Alright, moving on from the engines, it doesn't matter which one you pick, how much RPM it makes, how much torque it makes, how much horsepower it makes. It will go absolutely nowhere if you don't have a transmission. So let's see our transmission options and go from there. Okay, so here's our list of transmissions that we put together. These are what we would say the most desirable. There are a couple more that are available, but these are the ones that most people put into their K-swaps and the ones that people will sell. You'll see on Marketplace, at your junkyard or whatever. But yeah, you got your different final drive, you got your different amount of speeds, you got your different speed sensors, which we'll get into that after with wiring. Mounts as well change, depending on the outer casing that you have. Like a TSX has a different casing than a Civic Si or Type S, so the mount would be different. But here's a couple options. We'll also give you some charts that are available online. These are full tables with your 5 and 6 speeds, giving you all the options with all the different gear ratios of all the commonly used transmissions. So we'll put those slides in here real quick, and then you guys can go and see what you guys want to use for whatever applications. So you got your turbo setups, you got your all motor setups, you got your street setups, you got your 5 speeds, 6 speeds. The amount of options are endless. So yeah, just read the gear ratios and you'll pick accordingly. All right, so you just picked your engine and transmission. Now you can't just basketball throw this thing into your engine bay. It needs to be held properly. So you're gonna need an engine mount kit. To start off, here's a little base rule. If you have a K20, you need an RSX or EP3 post mount. Now, if you got a K24, you're going to need a CRV post mount. So for example, if you have a K24A2 out of a TSX, well, that TSX post mount will not work with a engine mount kit for a K-swap. So you guys are going to have to get your hands on a K24 CRV post mount. Now, depending on your chassis, which we have a little list here, which are the common Honda chassis that people swap their K-Series into, well, you're going to need specific mounts for that chassis. So we got EF, EG, EK, 7th gen, or EM2 as people call them. We recommend getting high quality mounts. We have tried eBay mounts in the past. As you can see in the EG section, it didn't go too well. So we suggest really buying some high quality mounts from either Hasport, Innovative, Hybrid. Many other companies make them, but those are the three big dog companies in the K-swap industry. Each frame has their pros and cons and different things they can't do. For example, in EG, you gotta cut the original tranny mount on the right side of the car. 7th gen, you can't even put a traction bar. There are alternatives, traction balls, they're called, that you could put to for wheel hop. But there's always pros and cons for different chassis, and they're all listed here. All right, so you just swapped your car and you're upping the power, and it's absolutely impossible you're not going to be dropping that clutch in Mexico to have some fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into our clutches. Now, as you can see on our first page, we're going to put some little quick important notes. If you have a 5-speed flywheel, so example base RSX or EP3, you're going to need a 5-speed clutch because the pressure plate on the clutch kit will match the flywheel. There's pins that align it. And a 6-speed flywheel, you need a 6-speed clutch. If there's any OG viewers of this video, you guys will know that our first video, we made this mistake and we found out the hard way that you cannot match a 5-speed to a 6-speed part on the clutch system. It does not work and it does not align. All right, to end our clutch segment out, we're gonna show you some brands that people use, what we've used, and that have good reputations in the K-Series aftermarket business. Now, we recommend that you buy your clutch according to your power level and power goals. We really hope that you're going to go turbo, so please get the appropriate clutch for your power levels. We've used competition clutch stage 4s, and we've been good for like up to 500-600 horsepower. But please buy according to your power levels. Next, we're going to move on to the ECU and harness section. These are our recommendations for ECUs that you could find out of stock cars. These are ECUs that you could find out of the junkyard or marketplace or something like that. Each of them have their pros and cons. We really recommend that you match your ECU to your harness that you're going to be running, and also even the transmission, we could say, because it depends on the speed sensor. Like let's say, for example, you wouldn't want to run a 04 Type S or 02 to 04 Type S with an 05 to 06 Type S because the speed sensor is different. And it's read differently, like it won't match the speed sensor, for example. As far as we're gonna go with aftermarket, you could go standalone and everything, but for your basic swap, the farthest you'll go probably is a Honda. And these are all ECUs that you could go K-Pro, like as you can see in the second section, K-Pro, K-Pro, K-Pro. You could put K-Pros into these ECUs. Another thing we wanna mention is matching for the transmission. As you can see in some of the bottom sections, reverse lockout. That's for your 6-speed transmissions. You don't need the reverse lockout, but it's also nice to have that protection to not go from 5th to reverse. That would like cause extreme damage. So if you could get that bonus reverse lockout out of a 6-speed harness, that would be the best thing. So yeah, here's the chart that we came up with, and go according to your swap on what you want to use. All right, here's some side notes as well for the ECU. These are actually really important when starting the vehicle. If you're gonna run a stock ECU, you're actually gonna need the ECU, immobilizer ring, and key that are matching from an original car that all came together, because they all read each other, I guess you could say. If you get a Honda, you can actually just go through your laptop and disable the immobilizer and steal the car yourself. There's also the last option that it's not the funnest thing to do, but it's available and you could wire it in. We also got K-tuned and hybrid racing. We only found a picture of the K-tuned one, but they also make a immobilizer bypass, which you could wire into your harness. We recommend looking at a video on how to wire these in. It's a little complex, but it's possible. We've done it with, I think, one of our cars, but it's another option to actually start your car. So basically, the K-Series was never meant to go into your car. So if you just slap it in, your dash is going to go like, "Bref, what are you doing?" So what you're going to need is an adapter harness for your chassis. Example, you're building an EK, well, you're going to need an EK swap harness. We got brands that make them. We got Hybrid Racing, K-Tuned, Wireworks. Other companies make them, but these are the ones we recommend. They're high quality and they're trusted brands. But yeah, you're going to need a conversion harness for the dash because if not, it's not going to be able to read. So conversion harness is a necessity. All right, we definitely know you're going to want to switch gears. You're going to need a shifter adapter plate. There's only one exception, which would be a 7th gen, EM2, ES1, whatever, however you want to call it. They can use a K-series shifter directly, or you could even use the stock one if it's a manual car. Now the rest, like I was saying, EK, EG for example, you have multiple plates and multiple options. We're going to go into those in a second. An important note before we get into the shifter adapter plate section is this all depends on the transmission you're running. RSX style, EP3 style would be the same. Now, if you go to a TSX, for example, the shifting mechanism is not the same. So you're going to need a TSX style shifter. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to match the shifter that you have. Let's say TSX, you're going to need a TSX shifter adapter plate. And RSX, let's say, you're going to need an RSX shifter adapter plate because the bolt patterns aren't the same. Right here, we have an above tunnel mount. There's a couple companies that make them. We got Bull Boost Performance, K-Tune, Acuity. I think that's how it's pronounced. Right here, we have a below tunnel mount. We got Bull Boost and K-Tune that make one. There's also another one that used to be made, but people had problems with. It's been deleted off the market. This would be your best bet right now. But yeah, this is an under the tunnel mount. So this is your other option. Your third option would be a no-cut shifter. The other two options we mentioned, the above and the below shifter, these you have to do some modification to the chassis. This one you don't, and you could revert back to stock and it's just a bolt-in option. Now moving on to our radiator section. An RSX radiator will work with some modifications. You might have to get some zip ties involved or something. Maybe make some custom bracketry, that works. There are some bolt-in options as well. We got K-Tune, we got Hybrid Racing, Mishimoto. A couple other companies make swap specific for your chassis radiators. Now, a little side note, for a 7th gen, if you find yourself a 7th generation hybrid radiator, that thing will bolt in perfectly for a K-swap. The radiator cap is perfectly placed for a 7th gen because it's from a 7th gen. Now, the main difference is the coolant hose. The top coolant hose will match perfectly with a K-series because it's on the driver's side. As a D17, the original motor, it's on the passenger side, so you'll have perfect hose placement and perfect rad cap placement with that radiator. All right, to bring the coolant from the engine to the radiator, you're going to need some radiator hoses. OEM hoses can be used. We actually run those right now, is we just cut them into place with the proper routing. Sometimes they need to be shortened and then just micmacked into place. This is what we run, but there are companies that make perfectly routed K-swap hoses for your specific chassis. So let's say you got K-Tune, they'll make an EK, EG swap hose kit for your radiator.
All right, the second half of KSS has showed up. Your editor and filmer actually. Thought I'd chime in for a slide or two. Now, if you want the temp sensor on your dash to work, you need to run the adapter. So on an EF, EG, EK, even a DC2, those chassis run an analog sensor. And on a K-series, they use a digital sensor. So you need to run the analog sensor for it to still work on your dash. Now, K-Tune sells this adapter. It screws into your coolant outlet on top of the head. Now, this will allow your temp gauge to still work on your older chassis. It's pretty simple to wire in. It's just a one-wire system. So just refer to your conversion harness on how to wire it in. Now, the axle setup. This is really going to depend on your engine mount kit because the engine will be in different positions based on the mounts that you get. Might be slightly forward, slightly to the right, slightly back. It's all going to depend, which will change what axle lengths you're going to need. So just refer to your mount kit to know what recommendations that they say for lengths. One thing for sure though is you're going to need an RSX, so either a base or a Type S, EP3 or 06 to 11 Civic SI manual half shaft. Automatic will not work.
All right, now moving on to exhaust so you can make sure your neighbors and your local Karens are gonna call the authorities on you. There's many brands that you could choose from, and it also has to go with the chassis that you're running. So for example, make sure if you have like an EK that you're building, we'll get an EK K-swap exhaust. There's many different companies that make K-swap headers, and they're, let's say, different material, different welds, different way they built it, and there's also a different price range, so go according to your budget. Just make sure it's something at least somewhat quality. This isn't a turbo video, so we're not going to get into turbo manifolds, but here's some styles of headers that you could buy. There's like Megaphone, there's 4-to-1, 4-to-2-to-1. It's going to depend on the power goal that you want and how you want your power and where you want your power in the RPM range. So yeah, just make sure to choose according to your chassis, power goals, and application and what you want to do with the car. Moving on to intake manifolds. Off of a K series, you could fit almost anything. So let's say you got a K20A3 base model, 160 horsepower, the bottom of the barrel K series. You could fit that intake on. It's plastic. It does not look good, and it doesn't work as efficiently as the others, but it could still work. So we compiled a list of manifolds that a lot of people use and that actually look good in the engine bay as well. So we got the PRB, RBC, RRC, which is a little rare, off of a Type R from Japan. We got the RBB from the K24A2, a TSX. Now, whatever one you're going to choose, just note that there's certain things that you need to do and certain things you're going to need to buy. So adapters for a throttle body, and sometimes you'll even have to cut the manifold depending on the head you're using. For example, if you're using a PRB with a K28-2 or a CRV head, you will not have to cut it. For example, if you're going to use an RBC, which I would say is the best bang for buck and looks beautiful in an engine bay, well, that RBC manifold, you're going to have to cut the water passages to fit a K28-2 or CRV style head, because the water passage is different and it's separately on the head. So yeah, here's a little list of intake manifolds that we personally would recommend because they're readily available, except for maybe that RRC. It's a little rare, but it is desirable for an NA build. Really good flow for a simple intake manifold. But yeah, here's our list. All right, moving on to the fuel system. In 99% of situations, you're going to want to run a fuel pressure regulator. The only one we can think of right now is a 7th gen. Because it's the same fuel system as an RSX, because it came with a K series, there's a regulator built into the fuel sending unit. Now, for an EK or EG, just put a fuel pressure regulator, because the original engine that car came with, well, the regulator was on the engine, on the fuel rail. Well, now that engine's gone and it's been replaced with a K series, so you're going to need another regulator. Since you're going to be working on the fuel system anyway, here's a little list that we've used in the past, like a good at least 10 times on 10 different cars, and it seems to work perfectly fine. Little regulator, some fuel lines, and a fuel pump. Now, if you're planning to run a stock ECU, this is just on the bottom here, we have a little note. Let's say you have a Type S ECU, well, use Type S injectors. If you're going to use a base model ECU, well, use base model injectors, because the dead times of those injectors match the tune that's in the stock ECU. All right, before we end the video out, we have a little miscellaneous section. We got 5 points here that are small but quite important and will help you with your swap. So the first one is an EP3 idler pulley. So you need this for a power steering delete. So let's say an RSX, it's got that big mechanical power steering pump. Well, if you're gonna delete power steering, take that out, just slap an EP3 idler pulley and your belt will ride freely on that without having any useless power steering pump turning for nothing. Second point, so an RSX thermostat housing. You can actually also use an EP3 and a CRV thermostat housing. This is the one at the bottom on the water pump. This points in the right direction for most hose kits, and even a stock hose if you're going to use that on your rad. It points down. Other ones point sideways or like up almost, and they don't work well with swap hoses or even other basic hoses from the junkyard, let's say. So RSX thermostat housing is a pretty much a must for your swap. All right, for the third one here, we got our heater hoses. You can make your own, maybe go to an RSX or CRV and get the general shape of a K series and then rig it into your heater core. But remember that you have your heater valve for your car so you can get heat. There's that valve that allows coolant to go to your heater core and stop it. Well, you're gonna have to plug that in so it can actually flow and work. But there's actually companies that make heater hoses for a specific swap for a K series, and then you can have heat in your car into your heater core. All right, for number 4 and 5, we got your engine accessory belt. We're gonna give you 2 options because it's the simplest way and a lot of research for finding possible answers. These are the 2 that we've used. So if you're gonna use a K20A2, which is a smaller pulley, actually in fact the K20Z3 is the same thing. If you're gonna use a small pulley, well, a 7PK1285. That's your measurement. So 7 in that number is the amount of ribs, which is the stock amount of ribs on a K-series pulley. PK, that's just some sort of code. Now the last number is 1285. That's the measurement in millimeters of the belt. This is the belt you're gonna need for a generic swap, let's say. So small pulley, all the rest is stock K-series, alternator, water pump, all that stuff. Pretty much all this stays the same, and an EP3 idler pulley. So if you're going to use the bigger pulley off of a K-series, for example, a K20A3 or a K24A1 from a CRV, well, the belt you're going to need is a 7PK1315. Now, Personally, we haven't used a 7 PK to 1315, but we have used a 6 PK 1315. Other than that, for miscellaneous stuff, I don't think you're going to have any more surprises, but this is the stuff we thought about at the end that we didn't want to have a full section. There might be a little bit more odds and ends depending on your chassis, but you're going to want to keep these 5 things in mind for sure. Alright, you guys have finally reached the end of the video. We know it was a lot of information, but we're pretty sure we got damn near everything you're going to need for your K-swap. Now, full disclaimer, this is not the scientifically proven way, but it's the KSS proven way. This is the stuff we've used for the past almost 5 years now, and we've got it pretty much dialed. If you guys think we missed anything, leave it down in the comments. Little tips and tricks, go ahead, leave it down in the comments as well. Now, if you're going to buy any of the Bulbu stuff we mentioned in the video, well, we have a coupon code. It's going to be right on the screen right now, and that will give you 10% off your order. Make sure to check out our Instagram as well. You'll see some behind the scenes stuff and what we're doing off of YouTube. But yeah, we really hope you enjoyed the video. Crazy to make, long to make, but fun to make. So hopefully you guys will learn something off of it, and we'll see you in the next one. Fuck it, I ate the op.